It started with a pause, a barely noticeable hitch in her voice when someone asked, "You came alone tonight?" She laughed, high and sparkling, and said, "Pretty much." I was standing 6 feet behind her, holding her coat. That's how the evening opened. Not with betrayal slamming the door in my face, but with it slipping through the gap beneath it, quiet and smoke-thin. I didn't interrupt. I didn't say, "Actually, I'm her husband." I didn't do anything, really. I just stood there for a moment too long, realizing the air in the room felt heavier around me than anyone else. Clarissa, my wife, my partner of over a decade, didn't glance back to see if I'd followed her in. She didn't check if I'd made it up the marble stairs to the penthouse suite. She didn't introduce me to the host or the people swirling around her like orbiting satellites. She didn't acknowledge me at all, and I didn't know whether to feel stunned or stupid. I kept thinking maybe I imagined it. Maybe she didn't hear the question clearly. Maybe pretty much was some inside joke. Maybe I'd stop shaking once I grabbed a drink. But then the second crack appeared. Her boss, the very reason for the party, walked over, all charm and teeth. He greeted her with 2 kisses on the cheek. 2, not 1. Not a polite handshake. She beamed, tilted her head, and did that thing with her hair she only ever did when she was nervous or flattered. She used to do it with me. Then the introduction started. "This is Evan, our regional lead. This is Carson from legal. He's hilarious. Wait till you hear his Vegas story." And this, she hesitated for half a breath too long, looked at me, then at her wine, then said, "This is Wendell." No title. No, my husband. Not even my friend. Just Wendell. Like I was the mailman. Or worse, a guy she accidentally brought with her. There's a humiliation that doesn't boil, it freezes. It doesn't roar, it hums beneath your skin. That's what I felt. Frozen in place, smiling politely, nodding, pretending that it didn't matter while everyone in that circle pretended I wasn't standing there with a pulse. She didn't look at me for the rest of the night. I watched her glide between conversations like a well-oiled ghost, laughing too loud, touching arms that weren't mine, performing like someone who had nothing left to hide. And maybe she didn't. Maybe I was the last thing she ever planned to reveal. It took me an hour to reach the coat room again. Not because I was far away, but because I couldn't make my feet walk across that floor. I kept hoping she'd glance over, wave me into her circle. Remember, she never did. I left before dessert. No words, no scene, just the soft pull of the exit door and the bitter sting of air that had more warmth than the room I just left. And as I stepped into the elevator, alone, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Not in her, in me. She might have acted like I didn't exist that night. But starting now, I was going to make sure she remembered I did. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling fan that spun like a slow lie. Clarissa came home just past midnight, heels clicking softly against the hardwood, perfume still clinging to her like fog. I didn't move. I pretended to be asleep. That's how small I'd gotten. Too scared to ask why she never looked for me. Too embarrassed to let her know I noticed. I listened as she slipped into the bathroom, stayed in there for 20 minutes, then crawled into bed and whispered, "Good night, babe," like nothing had cracked. But something had, and it was loud in my chest. The next morning, she left early, something about brunch with a few people from the party. I waited 5 minutes after the door closed before I got up. I didn't have a plan, just a sense that I had to stop living in the fog she'd built around me. That's when I noticed her tablet sitting on the counter, still open from the night before. Clarissa guarded her digital life like a dragon. Her passwords were always changed, her screens always tilted away from view. But for once, something was open, and I looked. It was her calendar. At first, everything looked normal. Meetings, client calls, a dentist appointment next week. Then I saw it. Every second Thursday of the month for the last 5 months, blocked out from noon to midnight, labeled with the same innocuous phrase, networking expansion. No location, no notes, just an all-day event that appeared right after she got the promotion. I never questioned it before because, well, why would I? But now, after last night, it felt like a loaded phrase. And then something caught my eye. This Thursday, the block had a location. She must have forgotten to delete it. It read, "The Harbor Club, private dining room, 7 p.m. My mouth went dry. The Harbor Club was one of those places with valet parking and chairs that probably cost more than our couch. I'd never been. She had once. She said it was for a women's leadership dinner. But this wasn't a dinner. This wasn't even business. I clicked back through the calendar. Sure enough, every networking expansion was on a Thursday night, always the second one of the month. I opened our photo album and cross-referenced the dates. On those days, she was either working late or heading to an after-party with the girls. Except now I knew there were no girls. There was a pattern, one I had never seen because I trusted her so blindly. I closed the tablet and sat down at the table with a knot in my stomach. Not anger, not even sadness yet. Just this cold awareness that I had been erased one small lie at a time. She didn't need to scream at me. She didn't need to cheat with fireworks. She just slowly made space where I didn't exist anymore and filled it with someone else. I looked around the kitchen, the notes I'd left her on the fridge, the framed photo from our 7th anniversary, the coffee mug that said #1hubby in fading letters. All of it looked like props from a play she stopped performing in years ago. I made a choice then. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to Thursday's networking expansion instead. She wouldn't see me coming. She never did. And what I saw when I arrived at the Harbor Club that night, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a performance so rehearsed, I wondered how long she'd been pretending I was a stranger. Thursday came faster than I expected, and with every hour that passed, the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I was rehearsing what I'd say if I caught her doing something, anything, that confirmed what my instincts were already screaming. But what would I even say? Hi, remember me? I'm your husband, the guy you forget to lie to properly. I didn't know what would hurt more, catching her in the act, or finding out I'd gotten it all wrong and that my paranoia had destroyed something that was still good. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was chasing a truth I hadn't wanted to see. I didn't follow her there. I arrived first. The Harbor Club was perched on the edge of the city's old marina, glittering above the water like it knew its own worth. Everyone who walked past the velvet rope wore tailored suits and cocktail dresses. I was underdressed and overwhelmed, but determined. I told the front desk I was meeting someone in the private dining room and gave Clarissa's name. The hostess, smiling without really looking at me, gestured toward a hallway lined with sconces and sleek art that looked like it cost more than our last vacation. I didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, I ducked into the men's restroom just past the hallway and waited. It had a long mirror that faced the hall through the partially open door. I stood still, almost afraid to breathe, watching shadows flicker through the gap. At 6:57 p.m., I saw her. Clarissa walked past the doorway like she wasn't married. Like she wasn't expected home. Like she hadn't whispered to me that morning, "See you tonight, love you." Her hair was pinned up in the twist she saves for big occasions. Her dress, a dark wine-red wrap that I hadn't seen before, hugged her in all the ways that used to be just for me. But what hit hardest wasn't her dress or her hair. It was the woman walking beside her. Tall, sharp, graceful. A face I recognized but couldn't place immediately. Then it clicked. She worked at the same firm. I'd seen her once at Clarissa's office picnic. Blair, I think? Something about her had seemed intense then. But this was intimate. They weren't just walking in together. They were holding hands. Not for long. Not blatantly. Just a casual finger graze between words. But it was enough. Enough to send a crack right down the center of my chest. I stayed frozen in that restroom for 5 minutes after they disappeared behind the frosted glass door of the private room. My hands were shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. It was thudding in this strange, slow rhythm, like it didn't want to wake me up from what I was seeing. This wasn't about some guy from her office. This was something else entirely. She hadn't just shut me out. She had replaced me with someone who didn't even exist in my world. Someone she hadn't mentioned once. Ever. She had a whole life that lived in the margins of her calendar, between fake meetings, soft lies, and cold dinners where she smiled just enough to keep me from asking questions. I couldn't go in there. Not yet. Instead, I stepped out of the building and stood across the street, watching the windows above as people clinked glasses and the night carried on like I didn't matter. And that's when I saw it. Through the third-floor pane, Clarissa and Blair stood side by side at the head of the table, laughing, toasting. Her arm brushed Blair's. Blair leaned in. It was soft, intentional. And that was the moment I realized something worse than betrayal. This wasn't a fling. It was happiness, just not with me. I walked home in silence, my feet moving but my thoughts static. The wind felt heavier. Every sound on the street seemed muffled. I unlocked the door, sat in the kitchen, and stared at the blank wall where our family photo used to hang before she'd replaced it with abstract art. When she came home that night, Hours later, she smelled like jasmine and wine. She said, "Hey babe," like her heart hadn't just walked out of that building without me. I said nothing. I couldn't, because I didn't know who I was married to anymore. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. Clarissa acted like everything was normal, humming while she packed her things for the gym. She kissed me on the cheek, like she hadn't toasted to a secret life hours earlier with someone who wasn't me. I stood in the kitchen, still in my robe, holding a cup of coffee I didn't remember making. I think she even said something like, "You're quiet today," but I couldn't reply. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more than a whisper of suspicion. I needed truth, raw and undeniable. And as fate would have it, the truth came to me. An hour after she left, I got a call from our building's front desk. They told me someone had dropped off a manila envelope addressed to W. Merrick. That's me. No return address, no explanation. I thought it might be a contract from a client, maybe something from our mortgage broker, something dull and bureaucratic. But when I picked it up and held it in my hands, it felt off. Heavier than it should have been. The kind of weight that doesn't come from paper alone. I brought it upstairs, locked the door behind me, and set it on the table like it might explode. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. The logo at the top said The Harbor Club, embossed in soft gold. Beneath it, in perfect cursive, was a handwritten note. Clarissa. Confirming your recurring private event booking with Ms. Blair Ainsley for the second Thursday of each month through December. As always, discretion is our priority. The chef will prepare the same custom menu. Let us know if you need to adjust the wine pairings. W. That was all. No photos. No receipts. Just one note. But it was the weight of everything. I felt dizzy reading it. It was like looking directly into the sun after weeks of pretending it wasn't daylight. I sat down hard, the envelope slipping from my fingers. My palms were sweating, my heart doing this slow, drowning thud. She didn't just cheat. She planned it. Repeatedly. With a custom menu and wine pairings and a venue staff trained in discretion. They had a routine. A whole choreography. I was living in reruns while she was rehearsing a whole other show. My mind spiraled. Did she love Blair? Was she leaving me? Were they laughing at me after each dinner, mocking the man who folded her sweaters and left post-it notes on her windshield? I shouldn't have looked at her tablet. I shouldn't have gone to the club. But now that I had, there was no pretending anymore. The mask was off, and all that remained was the quiet horror of knowing I'd been replaced with elegance. And then something even stranger happened. I noticed a small card tucked in the bottom of the envelope, like a business card, only thicker. It was navy blue with the Harbor Club's crest in gold, but on the back was a handwritten message. Wendell, I thought you deserved to know. No signature. No clue who wrote it. But someone out there had seen the truth and decided to show me. And just like that, the game changed. I wasn't just a clueless husband anymore. Someone else knew. Someone on the inside. And now, I wasn't alone in the dark. So I started planning. Carefully. Quietly. If Clarissa wanted to keep playing her part, I'd let her. But I'd rewrite the ending. The moment I read that handwritten card, Wendell, I thought you deserved to know, something clicked in me. A switch flipped. I wasn't just sad anymore. I wasn't lost, or weak, or spiraling. I was focused. For the first time in months, maybe years, my thoughts were cold and clear. Someone had seen what was happening. Someone had pulled me up from the fog with one quiet act of mercy. And now I knew what I had to do. I didn't want revenge. That's not who I am. I'm not the guy who screams or breaks things. I'm the guy who waits. The guy who listens. The guy who knows how to find the one moment in a storm when everything slows down and then walks directly into it. I called the Harbor Club the next morning. I used a different name, something neutral, and asked to reserve the same private dining room Clarissa had been using. They confirmed the next available Thursday. I said I'd take it. I didn't ask for the same menu or the wine pairings. I didn't want her perfect world. I just needed the space. Then I rented a small voice recorder. One of those sleek little ones that fits in a cufflink box. I tested it a dozen times, pacing my apartment while whispering into it, making sure it picked up everything. It did. The plan was simple. I'd invite Clarissa to dinner. Just us. I'd frame it as a celebration. A date night, I said over breakfast, trying not to choke on the words. You've been working so hard. I want to do something nice for you. She smiled, eyes flicking up from her phone for barely a second, and said, Sure, that sounds sweet. That Friday night, I arrived early again. I wore the same blazer I'd worn to her boss's party, though this time it felt like armor. I had the recorder hidden beneath a linen napkin on the center of the table, running quietly. I sat in the same room she'd used with Blair, surrounded by the same paintings, the same polished cutlery, the same scent of lemon candles flickering along the walls. She was 15 minutes late. When she finally walked in, she paused, just for a second, when she saw the table. Her eyes darted to the corners of the room like she was checking for something or someone. Then she smiled, that practiced, polite smile she gave to strangers or colleagues she didn't like. I hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since she'd smiled at me like I was hers. "Wow," she said, sitting down across from me. "This is fancy. What's the occasion again?" I looked her straight in the eye. "You." She blinked, then laughed softly, unsure. "Well, that's vague." Dinner was quiet at first. She talked about work, about how busy the next quarter would be, about some seminar she wanted to attend in Chicago. I nodded, responded with short answers, sipped my water, and waited. I studied her like a stranger would. Her gestures were different now, less relaxed, measured, like she was playing a role and couldn't remember all the lines. Then came the moment. I leaned forward, careful not to touch the recorder. "Clarissa," I said, "do you believe secrets can still be love?" She froze. Not dramatically, just slightly. A twitch in her jaw. A pause between breaths. She looked down at her plate, then back up at me. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one," I said. "Because I've been wondering if loving someone means knowing them, truly knowing them, or just being okay with the parts they decide to show." She set her fork down, the sound too loud in the quiet room. "What are you getting at?" I smiled, gently. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just tired. Just wondering if I'm someone you still love, or someone you've been protecting from the truth. Clarissa didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms, uncrossed them, picked up her glass and put it back down. The silence stretched thin, and I felt the recorder capture every breath between us. Then she said it. "You've changed." I nearly laughed. "I've changed." "You're not." She looked frustrated now. "You're not warm anymore. You used to be sweet, Wendell. You used to adore me." "I still do," I said. "I just finally stopped doing it in the dark." Her eyes narrowed. "What's this about?" "Harbor Club," I said simply. The color drained from her face. Just a little, but enough. She opened her mouth, closed it. "Wendell." "No lies," I said, holding up a hand. "I already know. I'm not here to explode. I'm here because you needed to know that I know. That's all." There was a long, brittle pause. Then, without touching her food, she stood up. "I'm not doing this here." But she didn't walk away. She stood there, staring down at me, uncertain. And I said the one thing I knew would haunt her more than any angry outburst. "I'm not going to fight for someone who already left me a long time ago." She didn't reply. Just walked out. Silent. No scene. No tears. Just like I had at her boss's party. Except this time, I was the one who watched her go. And the recorder? It had captured her silence better than any confession ever could. 2 full days passed. No calls. No texts. No keys turning in the lock. Clarissa didn't come home, and I didn't chase her. I lived in a strange stillness, one where the hum of the refrigerator was louder than usual, and the clink of my spoon in my coffee mug sounded like a bell tolling. I wasn't angry, not in the explosive way I imagined I'd be. I was hollowed out, like a wind had blown through me and carried the last illusions away. The silence had its own weight. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to march through the front door and demand an explanation, or twist everything around and ask how I could dare spy on her. But she didn't. Nothing came until Monday evening. There was a knock on the door. Not the fumbling kind. Not someone using a key they weren't sure would still fit. It was firm, measured, deliberate. When I opened it, Blair was standing there. Yes, that Blair. Hair in a loose ponytail. Minimal makeup. A navy peacoat buttoned up to the collar. One hand clutched a bottle of wine, the other held a black leather folder. I just stared at her for a second, completely unsure what world I was standing in anymore. She gave a half smile. "Mind if I come in?" I should have slammed the door. I should have told her to get off my porch, that I wanted nothing to do with whatever circus this had become. But instead, like the broken man I apparently was, I stepped back and let her in. She sat at the kitchen table like she'd been there before. She hadn't. But somehow she knew the place. That unsettled me more than anything. "I owe you an explanation," she said, unscrewing the wine bottle and pouring herself a glass without asking. She didn't offer me one. "And before you say anything, no, I didn't send you that envelope. But I know who did." I didn't speak. I just waited. She set the glass down without sipping. Then she opened the folder. Inside were photos. Not explicit ones. Not tabloid-style sleaze. But intimate. Clarissa and Blair. At art galleries. On the patio of some rooftop cafe. Walking down a street holding hands. One picture had them sharing a coat in the rain. Smiling. Real smiles. Not the ones Clarissa gave me when she wanted me to stop asking questions. I stared at them. Not because I was surprised by the content, but because of the date stamped at the bottom. They went back 2 years. Blair watched me absorb the timeline. Then she spoke, voice quieter. It wasn't supposed to start like that. We were just coworkers. Late nights. A few drinks. Venting about clients, deadlines, and you. My head shot up. She blinked. Sorry. I didn't mean it cruelly. Just, she talked about feeling invisible. That's what she always said. That you were kind, but you faded into the background. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never wanted to fall for her, she continued. But it happened. And once it did, she spun this idea that you'd be fine. That you didn't need much. That you'd never ask questions. And honestly, you didn't. The words weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Because they were true. I had made it easy. I had been so quiet, so accepting, so absent in my own home that Clarissa didn't even need to lie loudly. She just needed to wait for me to keep stepping aside. Blair pushed the folder toward me. I ended it 3 weeks ago. That caught me off guard. She said she wasn't ready to leave you. Said you were still part of the story. Whatever that means. I told her I wouldn't be a secret anymore. That if she wanted me, she'd need to face the truth. And she didn't. So I left. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. Then why are you here? She exhaled, slow. Because I think she's about to flip the narrative. Paint you as the one who lost her. Make herself the victim. And I couldn't let that happen. You deserve to know the whole truth, even if it hurts. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the guilt in someone's eyes and believed it was real. Before she left, Blair handed me one last envelope. This one was thin, unsealed, and inside it was a letter Clarissa's handwriting. Scrawled across the top, "If you find this, I'm sorry." It was dated nearly 5 months ago. The envelope was soft from being handled too much. The flap curled like it had been opened and resealed over and over. Clarissa had written my name across the front, just Wendell, no greeting, no flourish, like she wasn't sure what tone to use when addressing the man she married 12 years ago. Her handwriting was familiar, a little rushed, the way it looked when she was fighting herself. I held the letter longer than I should have, afraid that once I read it, I could never unread it. But of course, I read it. Wendell, if you ever find this, it means you know. Or you're starting to. I don't know which is worse. I've rewritten this letter so many times, trying to find the right way to say something that can't be cleaned up or softened. There isn't a right way. There's just what's real, and what I can no longer pretend doesn't exist. I didn't mean to fall in love with someone else. That sounds hollow, I know. But I didn't wake up and decide to betray you. It started slow, so slow I didn't even see it happening. One moment I was venting about my job to someone who understood. The next I was waking up thinking about her instead of you. And then, one day, I realized I hadn't thought about you at all. You were always safe, always calm. You never yelled, never demanded, never threw your weight around. And somehow, that became the problem. I stopped seeing you. Or worse. I saw you as part of the furniture of my life, always there, always dependable, always waiting for me to return. I hated myself for that. Still do. There's a part of me that wanted you to find out. Not to hurt you. God, never that. But to finally force a conversation we stopped having years ago. I don't know how to be the person you married anymore. I don't even know who she was. I wanted to tell you. So many times. I'd stand in the doorway and watch you sleep, practicing the words in my head. But you always looked peaceful, and I couldn't bear being the reason that changed. So I chose silence. I chose a lie. I chose the easy cruelty over the hard truth. Blair asked me to leave you. She said she was tired of hiding. I told her I needed more time. What I didn't say is that I wasn't ready to live in a world where you weren't mine in some way, even if only technically. I wanted both. And I know that makes me selfish. This letter was supposed to be the start of my apology. But it feels more like a eulogy now. I'm sorry, Wendell. For everything. For the silence. For the nights I chose someone else. For every time I made you feel like less than the man you are. Because you are a good man. You were always a good man. I just stopped being good beside you. If you hate me, I understand. If you can't forgive me, I deserve that. But know this, I never stopped hoping you'd see me again. And now I realize the tragedy is, you always did. I just stopped looking back. Clarissa. I sat there long after the letter ended, my eyes scanning the words again and again like I was trying to find something between the lines. Something that would undo it all. But there was nothing to undo. No moment I could rewind. She had left the relationship long before she walked out of that dining room. She had been gone while I still made her coffee, while I folded her sweaters, while I waited for her to laugh at my jokes that no longer landed. I couldn't decide what hurt more, the fact that she loved someone else, or the fact that she still called me a good man, like that was supposed to be enough. As if goodness made up for the fact that I'd become background noise in my own life. I thought about burning the letter, about throwing the folder Blair gave me in the trash and pretending none of this had happened. But I didn't. I placed it in the drawer of the nightstand on her side of the bed, right where she used to keep the book she never finished reading. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the place where she used to lie, where her warmth had long since faded, wondering how many nights I had reached out to nothing and called it love. In the morning, I packed a bag. Not hers. Mine. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Nothing poetic. Nothing angry. Just a few simple words. You don't have to come home to a man you no longer love. And I don't have to stay in a place where I don't exist. And then I walked out of the apartment. No dramatic exits. No slammed doors. Just a man finally choosing to be someone in his own story again. 3 weeks passed. 3 quiet, strange, beautiful weeks. I rented a small place on the other side of town. Just 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and windows that faced the sunrise. For the first few mornings, I sat on the floor with instant coffee and stared out at the sky, not sure what I was even doing. I didn't know how to live by myself. I never learned how to be alone without being lonely. But slowly, that changed. I started walking again. Not with a destination, just walking. I found a bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. The owner, Harold, was a man in his 70s who barely spoke but always remembered what I'd bought last. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down everything, not just what hurt, but what surprised me. The taste of fresh bread again. The way the sun painted the floorboards at noon. The way silence, once deafening, had started to sound like peace. Clarissa hadn't called. Not a single word since the night I left. Until one Tuesday afternoon, while I was folding laundry on the floor of my little apartment, my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. And then, with a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, I picked up. Wendell, she said softly, her voice cracked like something fragile trying to hold itself together. I didn't think you'd answer. I almost didn't, I replied, honest. A long silence followed. Then she said, I found your note. I've read it every day since. I said nothing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was just listening. I'm not calling to ask you to come back, she added quickly. I know I don't have that right. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. And not just the cheating. For forgetting who you are. For leaving you while you were still trying. I closed my eyes. Her voice was the same, but it no longer had the same power over me. It wasn't a chain. It was just a sound from someone I used to know. Thank you, I said. That's all. We didn't relive the past. We didn't drag ourselves through more hurt. We simply spoke as 2 people finally facing the truth, no longer clinging to what should have been. Before she hung up, she said, you always deserved more than I gave you. I hope, her voice caught. I hope you find that now. I already have, I said quietly. And I meant it. Because here's what no one tells you about being broken. Sometimes, it's not about putting the pieces back together the same way. Sometimes, it's about creating something entirely new from the scraps. Something stronger, quieter, more you than before. I didn't go looking for love after that. I didn't need to. I needed time with myself, with the man I had ignored for so long. The one who had been patient and kind and hurting in silence. But eventually, life found me anyway. One afternoon at Harold's bookstore, I knocked over a stack of paperbacks while reaching for a novel on the top shelf. A woman next to me laughed, helped me gather them, and said, you always start with the ones that fall. Her name was Nora. She didn't remind me of Clarissa at all. She wasn't loud or dazzling. She was quiet and curious and had this way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. We started talking about books, then coffee, then everything. I didn't rush anything. I didn't try to skip ahead. But one night, walking her home in the rain, she reached for my hand and said, You seem like someone who's been invisible for a while. I smiled and replied, not anymore.